Welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 77, Digging Deep to Find a Great Story, an interview with Susie May Warren, coming to you on Thursday, June 14th, 2018. This is such a fun interview. Just editing it, I was just giggling and laughing about how much fun we were having talking about writing. So if you're a writer, of course, you're going to love this interview because it's writers talking about writing, and we were having a good time. Now, I wanted to let you know that during the interview, I said that I hadn't yet finished the book Stormfront, which is book 5 of Susie May's Montana Rescue series, and book 6, which I believe will be the final book, will come out next year, I think. So she did say that it is one of the books that can be read as a standalone, that you won't have to worry about not understanding what's going on, as opposed to some series where if you start it anywhere other than book 1, you might be confused. So I just wanted to tell you, as a reader, I did find that to be true. Stormfront was easy to jump in on page 1, and I knew what was going on, or I knew enough about what was going on, even when people were talking about things that were happening and had happened in the past. I still wasn't confused about what was going on, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was so fun, lots of action, lots of everything. It was wonderful. I really loved it. So in case you were wondering as a reader, do I really want to jump into book 5 of a 6-book series? I will say, however, that because I liked it so much, now I'm like, I think I might have to read books 1 through 4 before I read book 6, because it was really good and I liked it a lot, and I was like, yeah, this is a series that I would read. So just putting it out there in case you're thinking, ooh, this sounds fun, I might want to try it. You definitely should try it. And if you think you might like it, you might want to start at book 1. But it was super fun, and I was really excited to be reading it. So now I have read it, and I can give you my big thumbs up. It was a really great book. I hope that you really enjoy this episode with Susie May. She is totally fun. She does have kind of a blue-looking, glowing writing studio there. So if you're watching on YouTube, it's just one of those things. Sometimes light does funny things in different spaces, and in her space, she's got a beautiful, tranquil blue glow. But it is a totally fun interview. I hope that you enjoy it. Let me know what you think. Tell Susie May what you think. And remember, at the end, I'll be telling you about that we will be bringing her back to talk more about specific how to write stuff somewhere around the end of July, beginning of August. So enjoy the show, and we'll talk to you more later. Today's guest is Susie May Warren. Multi-award-winning author Susie May Warren has charmed readers with her action-packed Montana Rescue series. With the newest installment, Stormfront, she executes the perfect blend of romance, adventure, and danger. Susan has written contemporary and historical romances, romantic suspense, thrillers, romantic comedy, and novellas, and makes her home in Minnesota. Welcome, Susie May.
Hi, thanks for having me, Katie. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, me too, especially because as the two of us were kind of emailing back and forth a little bit to get ready, I was like, oh my gosh, she sounds just like me.
Oh, I like that. Yes, make it out. It's too bad you live so far away. You need to come closer to us. Or maybe I need to go there. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm sure that we need a writing retreat in Sweden.
Probably we do. We need a writing retreat in Sweden, for sure.
Okay.
There. Set up a
yeah. It's a beautiful place.
I've heard that. I've heard that. So yes. Okay. Well, we'll put it on the books.
All right. I like it. Now, the reason why we're talking today is because you have a new release, Stormfront, which, if I remember right, is book 5 in this series. Is that right?
Yes. It's very fun. It's a 6-book series. I can't believe that we're already at number 5. It's been going really fast. We've been putting the books out really fast, about every 5 months, just because readers really like to, keep going with those stories, and they're very closely connected. I'm a very strong series writer. I write stories that are very, they have subplots that go over to the next book, and so readers are waiting for things to happen, and I plot it that way, but it's hard to wait. So I talked to my publisher into putting it out quickly. We have all worked very, very hard in order to do that. I mean, I don't think that they've ever had an author that's like, okay, here it is, okay, now next week we're gonna start the new one, and they're like, what? And they have been so fantastic. I love working with Ravel, and they've been so. Anyway, yes, book 5 is out, and we're very excited, and book 6 comes out in November, I think. So
wow.
Very fun.
Oh, that is exciting, especially for traditional publishing. That's quite a fast.
It is. They've really bent over backwards to kind of give me what I wanted, which was a fast series, and I think it's been very successful. So it's been really fun to write and fun to be a part of.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I'm partway into Stormfront. I'm definitely at the part where at night I'm like, okay, I need to finish this because I'm going to interview her, but I want to finish it because it's just really interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It is a fun story. It's a little bit different than some of my other stories. You know, every story in the series has a different purpose in terms of hooking a reader. So this one was almost for readers who maybe haven't picked up a Susie May Warren series yet. It was standalone enough that people could be like, okay, who are these characters and whatever. So I tried to make it, so like the book that came out before this, the fourth book, was a reader favorite book. It was two characters that had ignited, you know, way back in the first book, and readers were really waiting for these two people to get together. And so, you know, it was very much sort of the accumulation of their waiting, and, you know, just sort of it was, like I said, it was a reader favorite. They really wanted that to happen. So that's great, but you can't always have reader favorites like that. You need to start out, you know, again, with something new. So this book, Stormfront, has a character that people haven't really seen much before. He's kind of a brand new character. He's not brand new to the team, but he hasn't been on the page as much. He did have a subplot in, I think it was book 2 or 3, book 3, he had a subplot. So we're kind of picking up the subplot, but people won't have missed, you know, if they won't have felt like they missed out, I don't think, if they haven't read it. So it's okay. So anyway, fun book. I'm really proud of this book because I really feel like it's got a strong message. The situation is a little bit different with the characters, very unique heroine. And my hero is sort of a beta hero that turns out to be this amazing guy who I really was falling in love with at the end. I thought he might be my favorite of all the Peak team members. Just the way he behaves, and he has a scene at the end that just grips my heart. So anyway, very fun. So fun to write. And it's about a tornado in Minnesota. It's like, hey, we get those. So it was kind of, again, a fun element to write about.
Oh my goodness.
Fun in terms of, like, not fun that there's a tornado, but rather different than normal. So it was kind of had a lot of elements that I could incorporate. Let me put it that way.
Oh, nice. Now I'm just trying to remember, based on the series title is Montana Rescue, but this one's set in Minnesota.
Right. So, you know, when you're writing a big series, if you set it always in the same location, it can get kind of humdrum, you know. I mean, you can only have so many people fall off cliffs, fall into whitewater rivers, you know, get into skiing accidents. I mean, what really, at some point we got to be like, okay, we got to expand our reach here. So anyway, so book 4 actually took them to the Caribbean for part of the story, which was really fun. I had to do research, you know, to get down there, so that was really fun. We went on a cruise, so that
that sounds really hard.
It was tough. You know, what you do for your craft, right?
That's right.
So I kind of used those experiences, but then I thought, okay, we'll bring them back to Montana. We knew we were coming back for the finale, so where else could we go? And Minnesota, of course, is my backyard. So, and I've written a lot of books in Minnesota, and I thought, oh, this would be a great idea. So yes, we did set it in Minnesota, and for people that read Susie May Warren books, it'll be a really familiar place for them, because they'll be like, oh, sure, we've been to Minnesota before. And so anyway, so that was fun. But yeah, the last book goes back to Montana. So the team is set in Montana. So, but the team can travel, and it still is Montana. So Montana with them.
It reminds me, I can't remember the name of the series, but it reminds me of a Suzanne Brockman series that I read with a bunch of security people.
So she has one called Troubleshooters, I think.
That one.
Troubleshooter series. Yeah, I really like those too. They kind of go all over. So
Yeah. Well, so I guess you just have to decide where you want to go on vacation, and then have a reason why your team needs to go there, right?
Yeah, that's right. We just went to Italy for 2 weeks, and you may see Italy in an upcoming book. So you just never know.
Nice. Oh, how exciting. Good. Yeah, I said something to my editor about, you know what, I actually didn't say anything about writing specifically. We were talking about what I needed to do while I was in the process of moving, if I was going to try to work and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and she kind of interrupted me and said, and by the way, do not come up with a new book idea set in Sweden. You haven't finished the book idea you had in New Zealand or the one in Australia. Well, yeah.
I know. It's hard. I hear you. You get kind of backlogged. You're like, I can only write so fast. I have so many ideas, and yeah, I hear that. Believe me,
that's right.
That's my problem too.
Well, you know what? There's probably a lot of listeners who feel that way. So, can you talk a little bit about how you try to organize yourself or schedule yourself? Since you're traditionally published, there is. Somebody actually has given you a contract and said, this is what we want to do. But until you got to that point, or maybe while you're in the middle of it still, how do you make these choices?
Well, for one, right now I'm actually both. I'm a hybrid. So I'm traditionally published and indie published. And so I am very much kind of juggling the schedule that I have. My traditional publishers are my priority. No matter what happens, I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I finish that and I give the right attention to that book. My indie books are sort of like on the side, moonlighting, and I'm able to kind of take some ideas and do different things with them that I wouldn't do in my trad books, right? But even before I got published, I was very organized about my time. So I use what is called a time template. So in the course of my week, I have writing blocks. And in my writing blocks, I have like little mini goals. Like in this writing block, I'm going to write one scene. And usually my scenes are around 1,800 words, something like that. And I know it's going to take me about 2 to 3 hours to write that, with the research and everything. So I say, okay, I need a 3-hour writing block. And if I have like 4 of those in a week, I know I can complete 4 scenes or, whatever. So for me, it's about how many writing sessions or writing blocks do I need to finish this book. Right. So if I have 20, I usually write 20 chapter books. There's usually 2 to 3 scenes per book. So, that's about 60 scenes. And so I need about 60 writing sessions to get that done. And so when I look at my calendar, I'm like, okay, where am I going to put my writing sessions so that I can make that happen? And sometimes I have 2 writing sessions in a day. Sometimes I have 1. Sometimes I have 3, depending on, how much time I have. So, but that's kind of how I organize my time. And then I set up little deadlines for myself. Okay, I'm going to have the rough draft by this time, the edits by this time, finished process by this time. Even before I was published, and especially now as an indie author, I have to make sure I do my trad deadlines, but then I've got like this chunk of space. Well, all right, if I need to finish what I'm working on before I have to start working on my next trad book. So I'm really like, gun to the head, sort of like get down, sit down, button share, get your work done, and so, but that's how I kind of organize my time is writing blocks in the house.
Okay. And then I am taking a guess here that you at some point had to train yourself to be able to go back and do edits on the prior book while you're working on the first draft of the current book.
Right. So what I usually do is, again, it's a writing block time. So what I will often do is say, okay, I know I'm getting my edits for my trad book back this week, or, I kind of get an idea. And so I usually will block out those 2 weeks and say, okay, now my head is going to be back in the game, for this book. So that means I want to get to, say, the end of Act 1 in this book prior to going here. Or maybe I'm going to get to the middle before I go here. And so I kind of try to find logical stopping places so that I can arrange my brain to say, okay, I know that, I'm at the end of Act 1. We're going to start the Noble Quest. Okay, done. Work on something else, come back. Now I know where I'm, kind of going. So I kind of work that way so I can, if I have to take a break. So, and yeah, that kind of helps me a lot. So
yeah.
Otherwise, I can't stop like mid-scene. I would be lost. I have to stop like mid-act or something like that.
It's good to talk to lots of different people because I try to make sure that listeners are hearing from me, like these are some ways that you can do something, but there is no one way that works for everybody. And I have read several, like at least 3 how-to writing books where that particular person as a fiction writer is like, I stop in the middle of a sentence. And I'm like, I tried it 2 or 3 times and I was so angry because I knew I had this great thought. I would never forget it. And then it was gone.
No, I can't do that. I have to, I can't even stop. Like if I was going to take a 2-week break, I couldn't stop in the middle of a chapter. I would need to be done with the chapter, right? And
Yeah.
I couldn't. I do think it's important to go over your working. So I like always add in time to rewrite, So I have written sentences where I'm like, I little put an asterisk there, and that basically means this sentence sucks, so you need to go back and fix it, or you didn't say what you wanted to say. So I kind of like make little notations like that, or I'll even be like, insert emotion here, sort of thing, where it's like I know I haven't gotten the right emotion, so I make little notes. But in my rough draft, I just fly through the story. I don't go back and edit it until it's all done, and then I go back and do my rewrites, and then I edit it. So everybody's different, like you said, but that's just how my brain works. I have to kind of complete something before I can go and do something else.
Yeah. On the other hand, you don't do it I think it's Susan Elizabeth Phillips and Jane Ann Krentz always have that, the two of them talking during RWA every year. They always have this great session.
Yeah, I love their session.
Yeah, and no matter how many times you hear it, even though in a way they're saying the same thing every year, they're just so entertaining that it feels more, and it's fun. But I'm pretty sure of the duo, Susan's the one who keeps working on a chapter until she's really done with it, and then by the time she gets to the end of the book, she's kind of done with the end of the book, right? Yeah. You're rush through the first draft, come back.
Yeah, I because my story will change. I am a plotster, so I use a system called the story equation, where I start with my story idea, my story seed, and then I go to my characters and I drill down into who they are and what they want and why. And it's something called the dark moment story that is kind of the foundational core of each of my characters. And then I pull out the plot based on that story and what they want and need and how they need to change and grow. And then I will take my story seed and I'll kind of put it in there and I'll bloom the plot together. Once that's done, I do this thing called I tell myself the story, where I kind of sit down and I like write out or I speak out the whole story to myself so I can hear it. And once I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, I like it, or I need to fix that, or go deeper, or I ask myself questions, or okay, why does he do that? Okay, fix that. Then once I do that, I take it and I cut it, I transcribe it into a document where I can cut it up and put it in my Scrivener in scenes. But then once I've got that done, now I've kind of got my recipe for each scene. So when I'm ready to write, I open up that little recipe card and go, oh, this is what needs to happen here. Okay, now I can start my scene. And then once, I kind of have the substance and the directions, but then I just let the scene go. And that's where I'm like super organic. I'm like, I step into it in my character skin, feel their emotions, what they want, why, all that kind of stuff, what's at stake, and then write the scene. So anyway, all that to say is that when I get finished with that, I just keep moving, because now if I start to polish, it's almost like I'm using a different part of my brain,
right?
And I can't, it's like, and I'm getting analytical, and I'm getting, and so that's it. I have to. It's almost like my first draft has to be messy and emotional and sort of like, and I put in anything I want. I mean, I don't censor myself. So there may be scenes that you're like, oh, that wouldn't work for the market that you're in, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll think it all later, or whatever, or maybe say they do something or say something or whatever, but I really keep it uncensored. And then when I go back to polish it, that's when or edit it or rewrite it, then I'll fix that, and then I'll polish it and make it fit the story and the characters better and all that kind of stuff, my audience and stuff. So Anyway, yeah, I couldn't polish as I go because I would change too many things, and then I'd have to go back and I'd spend all that time on the work that wouldn't keep.
Right.
But everybody's different. I think that, Susan Elizabeth Phillips, who's a fantastic writer. I love her stuff. I mean, that's just how she does it, and bravo to her, that she does it that way. Great.
Yeah. I have to say that I've been enjoying interviewing so many people just because, it's fun. I mean, writers love to talk about writing. Right. But there's so many people talking about, my favorite method or my favorite book or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, for business purposes, I'm just going to have to take the time that I hadn't been giving myself before, when I was like, oh, I really want to read this book, but I don't have time. So, I've been reading Lisa Cron's Wired for Story, which is all the neuroscience of it, which really totally adore. Yeah,
really good.
Last week, Patricia Bradley was talking about using James Scott Bell's superstructure and writing to signposts. That's her method.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 weeks ago, Chris Fox was on talking about his new book, Plot Gardening, and how he looks at it as this other different kind of organic, semi-plotting, semi-pantsing process. And I love it because there's all these different ways that it just depends on how your brain works.
Right. And you just got to pull things. Like I've used a lot of James Scott Bell's stuff. I've used a lot of Jeff Gerke's stuff. I use a lot of Donald Moss's stuff. James Fry, How to Write a Damn Good Novel, is really good. I loved his stuff. Save the Cat, Blake Snyder, I love his stuff. So and Wired for Stories got great brain chemistry stuff. Jeff Gerke has also a brain chemistry book out, which is really, really intriguing. So, I mean, all that stuff is, you just got to put it in your toolbox and go, what works for me, you know, and kind of pull out those elements. So, and then I created my own system that worked for me, and it's worked for other people too. But again, it's, you know, you just have to grab pieces from it and put it into your arsenal. So yeah, I think that's part of the magic of a writer, is we all have our own little way of getting the story on the page.
That's right. That's right. And then we end up with all these really interesting different stories, you know, even if we're essentially writing what could be looked at, you know, this plot is more or less the same as this plot, and yet it's totally different, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Because you bring your own voice to the story, right? So even if I'm writing Goldilocks and the Three Bears, I'm going to write it differently than you are, because I'm going to write it from, you know, Goldilocks, the tortured girl who never gets what she wants, and you're going to write it from this little bear who's takes advantage of it all. You know, people take advantage of him all the time, or whatever, right?
Right,
so
right.
You're going to bring your own voice, your own experiences, your own bents to the story, and then of course you're going to tell it in a different way. My voice is different than yours, and so, you know, and then of course everybody engages with the story differently. So they might love my story and not like yours, or they might love your story and be like, Susie's not so good, you know, depending on, even though it's the same story, just depending on how we've told it. And so that's great. That's why I'm so thankful when people pick up my books. I'm like, oh great, out of all the billions of books out there and all the readers that we have out there, somebody liked my book. Yes, you know, I just look at that as a real gift.
Yeah, because I think it's important for us to remember as writers that when we're the reader, and sometimes it's just hard to remember to put yourself back in the shoes that you started in originally.
Yes.
But when we're the reader, sometimes a book is just the storyline isn't going to appeal, or the level of detail. Like I love the Tom Clancy movies, Hunt for Red October and Onward. And so I picked up Hunt for Red October out of the library once, and I don't think I made it through chapter 1. I'm like, too much military technology detail. I don't care. I just story part, you know, but somebody else is writing. I just had another example in my head, but everybody brings, and depending on where you personally are, and not only your whole life experience, but for lack of a better word, this one's kind of negative, but the baggage that you have in this moment. Like my friend Janice Cantori was like, you've got to read this book by, not Thomas Locke, Davis Bunn, his real name. And I cannot remember the name of it, but I started it and I was like, spies. Of course, Janice wants me to read a spy book. This is just so boring. But she was like, no, Kitty, just keep going. And I had gotten it from the library, so I had it for 3 weeks, and I was in the library parking lot to return it and just tell Janice, I did try. And I'm like, well, you got to at least read the entire first chapter, or else you're sort of lying to your friend. And by the time I got done with the first chapter, I went in and rechecked it out. I'm like, okay, apparently I was just in the wrong mindset 3 weeks ago.
Right. And that is often the case, right? It's like I tried for years to get into the Outlander series, could not get past the first 3 chapters. I was like, what in the world? And then I had a good friend say to me, skip those 3 chapters and start at chapter 3. And I was like, okay, or 4. And I did. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I like it. And so then I devoured all of the books and then got so it's like, it was funny to me how, you know, I just didn't grab me like everybody else did. But then, you know, that's my advice. Skip the first 3 chapters. You can always go back to them, but you want to read it when she goes, you know, back in time. So anyway, and it's obviously Diana Gabaldon is a master. She's such an amazing writer, but she was still getting her legs in the series in those first 3 chapters. And so, she was introducing Claire and, and all those kind of elements. And it's great writing. It's fantastic writing. It just didn't quite grab me like it could. And I have since gone back and read it. So all I'm saying is that, yes, give a book a chance. If you didn't love it, go back to it, see maybe there's, maybe something was holding you back, maybe, give the first chapter another read. I think an author puts a lot of work into a book, and it's probably worth taking the time to really look and go, hey, is this going to be a good story?
Yeah. Which is a great segue into something that I wanted to bring up. I loved, there are some questions and answers kind of thing in the end of your press release for the new book. Okay. And I wanted to talk more about one of the answers that you gave to one of the questions. So the question is, what do you hope readers gain from reading Stormfront? And you said hope, in the sense that when life feels like it's taken you out, left you devastated, there's a way to get back up. I would love for you to expand a little bit more on your why for writing.
Yeah. So this story in particular was close to my heart. So the story in itself, and you find out very quickly in the first chapter that the heroine is a recovering, she's a breast cancer survivor, kind of right out of her, she's kind of right at the end of her first year being cancer free, right? So she's really struggling with what does her life look like. Plus she's had a double mastectomy, and so she really feels like her life is like, she's a young woman and she feels disfigured and not beautiful. And she had this man in her life very short term, and she kind of ran away from him. He was wealthy and he was super awesome, but he was took care of her a little bit too much. And she was like, I really feel like I can't carry that baggage in. Plus sometimes it's hard to have other people in your misery with you. So she walked away from him, and she walks back into his life in this book. And it's about this idea that how do we get back up after we've been devastated? And so the metaphor of the tornadoes was very metaphorical in her own personal journey of, she felt like she had been wiped out, and how does she put her life back together again? And I had also gone through a time, so when I was writing this book, my mom had recently passed away from cancer. Oh. And so for me, it was a very close theme to my heart, because I myself was like, how do I get back up from this? How do I move on? And even, and so I was kind of writing from the point of view of someone who had taken care of someone who had cancer and then lost them. And, but it was close enough to her that I understood a lot of the things that my heroine Brett was going through, in terms of feeling like, you were sort of decimated in your life, right? So all of those things conspired to put me on a journey of, where is hope in all of this? And I started to see small things, like the fact that people who love you they keep coming back. They stay in the fight with you. Even if they can do nothing but sit by your bedside and hold your hand, they stay there, right? They celebrate small things with you. You're not destitute and alone. And I think that what happens is we assume that no one wants to go on the journey with us. We assume it's going to be too hard, that they don't want to share in our misery. But the truth is that love does want to go on the journey with us. And we lose out on the joy of having someone with us. But also as a caregiver, if my mother had said, no, I got this, I don't need you, I would have missed out on the treasure of taking care of her and being in her life in those pivotal moments. It ministered to me to be able to take care of her. And what happens is people feel so helpless when someone they love is going through a difficult time, that allowing them to come alongside and help actually helps them deal with their own sense of grief and helplessness and all of those things. And so the book was really about that marriage of, let me help you, let me help you to help me, basically, and let me receive that as a gift to you, and so it was kind of this. So I talk a lot about hope, that it's around us if we're willing to open ourselves up to it. There's, and even in those devastating moments when my mom did pass away, she passed away knowing, I mean, everybody's going to pass away at some point in their lives. So let's pass away with good relationships and with people that we love around us, and allowing people who love us to partner and to minister to us, and so that we can minister to them back. And so, and of course, being a Christian and a person of faith, I also kind of add a little bit of that faith element in there, that there is eternity, and stuff. But I really kind of focus on what is that relationship between the caregiver and the care receiver, and in the intimate, in terms of the cancer and the personal thing, but also obviously in the tornado element. You've got this tornado that's taken out the town, and what are the I was really blessed by a lot of I read numerous books on tornadoes, and I watched numerous videos, and so much of it was, there were people. So when the tornado took out, there was a town in Oklahoma City, I think it was outside Oklahoma. When the tornado, I can't think of the name right now, but I will. When it took out that town, there were other people who in Moore, I think it was Moore, Oklahoma, who had been devastated. They came to help these people, and it was like they knew what these people were going through, and so they came to minister to them. And I was really blessed by that, because I thought that's what we need to do. We need to step into each other's lives and say, I want to help you, because it will help me, but it will also help you. Let me help you. And it's that, we live in a world where it's like, we're Americans. Oh, we're so, we're proud. We don't want it. We don't need help. And I feel like that we steal the blessing from each other when we say, I don't want your help.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many times too. And you're right. 'Cause I'm thinking, oh, I should explore this, 'cause I've experienced this in my life, where the person that, you're wanting to love and support and help in some way is like, no, I don't want you to remember me in this kind of pain. Like, stay away, let me die by myself so that you remember me happy. And they don't realize what they're stealing from you while they're trying to protect you. So that would be, I'm like, oh, that's something I should explore with some character somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I got to explore with Brett, is that she also, of course, obviously there's the physical thing where she starts to get in this relationship with Ty, and she's like, yeah, and I'm missing some parts here, and he's like, this is not who you are. This is your physical body, but this is not who you are, and she had to kind of, women, we hold on to some of those elements, and it's kind of who we are, and it shouldn't be. We're more than that. And so we explore that a little bit. So it's a multi-layered book. I'm really proud of it in terms of just going to those hard places. There was one of my favorite scenes in the book, was really, really true for me. There was a scene where she was talking about, her pain, and he said something about, God cares. And she's like, listen, I know God cares. I'm all on board. I just want to be mad. Okay. So I just let me be mad. I can be mad without having a crisis of faith here. And I really think that that's true. It's like, sometimes we just need to just be mad, know? And so they did this thing that kind of helps relieve some of the anger. But I remember after my mom died, I was like, I'm not going through a crisis of faith. I still think God is good. I trust that he's got a plan. I trust that he's going to comfort me. I just want to be mad. All right. So just out, throw things, and just talk about the injustice of it all. And, just let me, and my husband's like, yeah, let's be mad together.
Yeah.
and again, that's part of the journey. It's like, he's entering into my suffering and bonding with me in it, and he's helping me through it. So, for whatever.
Yeah.
It was a great scene. I loved it. I cried my way through it.
Yeah. It's so weird. Only writers can say this. So everybody who's listening, if you're not a writer, you have to pause this for a minute. Don't listen. I kind of love typing a scene that is moving me so much that I'm like, I need more Kleenexes. I can't see my typewriter.
I know, right? I love it. I'll come down for dinner and the kids are like, Mom, what's wrong with you? They don't live with me anymore. They used to be like, someone I cared about just passed away, or I just went over a cliff in a car and I'm scared, whatever. And they're like, there are things wrong with you. But I always say, if I haven't cried at the end of the book hasn't made an impact on me. So I'm always like, that's my trigger point. If I've cried, I'm like, yes. And I cried a couple times during this book. I cried at the end, especially when something happened. So you'll have to wait and see. So anyway.
I'm all excited.
Kind of stuff. So anyway, but yeah, I think that we're, as authors, we're the first ones to experience the emotion of the story. So if we're not crying, then we're not doing something right.
Yeah. Which leads into another thing that I was just so excited when we were emailing a little bit with each other, preparing for the interview, and you were talking about that you love to teach people to write great stories, but you also think that stories can nudge the world. And I love the way that you said nudge. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I like that. And then I told you that the tagline for my show and classes is write a book, change the world, because I'm absolutely, first of all experience points to it being true. I mean, who does not have a friend who's got this story about, I read this book and then this big change happened in my life? The thing that I always remember, because to me it seemed so weird at the time because I hadn't yet read the Tolkien whole series of Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings and everything. Because I hadn't read the whole thing, I was always kind of like just cocking my head like, that is so weird, I don't understand. But one of my friends said that he came to know Jesus and gave his life to Jesus after reading the Lord of the Rings. And I was like, that is so weird. I don't know where the connection is there, but yay.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, I think stories are so powerful. If true stories, fictional stories, whatever, they're all testimonies of a journey that a character has gone on. And if a story is well told, we will relate to the character. We will learn the lessons that they're learning. We will triumph with them at the end. And hopefully all of those things will conspire to give us some truth and some hope and something in us that will click, that makes us go, you know what, instead of doing this, I'm going to try to do this, because even though that character is fictional, they did it and it worked, and I'm going to try it myself,
Yeah.
And so this is why we have memoirs, this is why we have fiction, this is why people can stand up and tell their stories, is because they're trying to share the victories, challenges, victories, growth that they've had, so that it will help other people. So maybe, obviously we don't read books necessarily, oh yes, I need to be helped, I'm going to read a book, right? But it gets inside of us and we go, this was an interesting topic, I think I'm going to think about this a little bit more,
Yeah.
So if writers can rightly handle the themes, maybe not answer all the questions, but maybe throw out questions, maybe throw out some what ifs, maybe have some resolutions. I think it gives readers tools to interact with their own issues in their lives, to say, maybe we could do something different. And in that way, the different thing that they do as a result of reading that book is the small nudges that we make in the world towards different, hopefully better situations. So that's kind of my thinking. So that's why I try to write very honest characters. I don't write characters that are fluffy. My characters are gritty. They're honest. They say what they think. They go through, they do bad things. They go through bad things. But that's life. That's what people do. So I like to write about.
Yeah. You were saying that you'd like to make sure that it's the real truth, that however they really are. Now, I would guess then that what you are doing as a writer in the Christian fiction space for your traditional books is that you're finding ways to say what you're trying to say without, maybe it's not necessarily in the dialogue. Like maybe what's probably happening, but it's just not written down. Is that kind of where you're going with some of it?
Here's the thing. I believe that inspirational fiction just adds in that spiritual element, a great story. And I think everybody has a spiritual part of themselves, and they couch it in emotions or character journey or whatever, or theme, and I mean, I just feel like we need to address the full person, and the full person includes a spiritual element to it, right? So when I'm interacting in a story, what I try to do is put in truth. So there'll be like droplets of truth that I call them truthlets, and truth speakers, which if you look at the Christopher Vogler hero's journey, there are truth tellers in that journey. Yeah. It's very similar to and so I just take, instead of universal truth, I kind of take God's truth and I'll sprinkle that through there. And then my character will interact with that truth in some way. They'll either reject it or they'll embrace it and it'll change them, and then they get it tested. or they have that truth that comes to them at the end, and then they use that truth and it changes them, and then they can do something at the end that they couldn't do at the beginning. So I'm very careful not to preach. I'm like, you know what, again, I'm trying to interact with truth, but I'm not trying to like tell readers this is what you need to think. I want them to walk away and go, huh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll consider that, or I'll do some more more research on that, or whatever. But I want them to walk away with kind of that truth that's nudging them a little bit, for them to go, okay, how do I deal with this? So it's, again, so my character may say, God loves you, and my other character might turn around and say, I don't care. Don't tell me God loves me. And because that's a real reaction when you are in pain. But then later on, maybe my character might say, okay, well, he said God loves me, and then he did these things to show it. Maybe he does love me, and then maybe that's all we do with it. And then, and so now my reader walks away with going, what does that look like for God to love me? If I was really to think about it, is there places in my life where God has shown up to love me? Maybe there is, right? So that's kind of how I work with that. I'm not really a big, I don't preach sort of thing. I'm more like, what if? Throw that truth in, see what happens.
I love it. When I was reading Kristen Billerbeck's The Theory of Happily Ever After, before my interview with her a couple of weeks ago, I was telling her, and then I just decided, you know what? I've made it a point to try to be as transparent as possible as a human being, as a podcaster, as a writer, as a writing teacher. And so, at the risk of having people go, this show is stupid, I'm just never going to listen again, I was telling people that I'm reading this book, and like every few chapters, I'm just stopped and bawling, because even though I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I don't have a New York Times bestselling, nonfiction book about something and all these other things, I'm nothing like her. But I was exactly like her, where I've just been really struggling in this place of, I don't know who I am anymore, or what I'm supposed to do with my life, or whether or not, like, maybe this is a crossroads that's a T. You can't go forward anymore, or I just can't see where there could possibly be a road forward, or, there's all these things that are in your head. And then you're reading this character, and it was so interesting. So it's a 350-ish, I don't know, page. It's a regular full-length novel. Mm-hmm. I read that whole novel in like 2 days. I could not get myself to read the entire article on burnout once I realized that was probably what I was experiencing. The article on burnout was probably 2 pages, but the 350 pages about somebody else and how they work themselves through it, I was like, okay, I just have to stop and totally cry, because this is totally how I feel, and then I need to find out what she does next.
Yeah.
And after reading that book, I recorded another, I have an encouraging words episode every Sunday, and I recorded another episode immediately and just said, listen, I've been thinking about not writing, but now I'm seeing how this book has affected me so much. What if she hadn't written it? What if I hadn't read it? And I'd still be laying on the couch watching Netflix and, waiting for, when is it my turn to go to heaven and die? Because that's what I just had nothing else like.
All right, well, I'm glad she wrote that book then, yeah.
It's not like you said, to be really angry at God doesn't mean you're having a crisis of faith. To just feel like, I don't know what to do with my life, I just want to go to heaven, does not mean you're suicidal. It just means you've lost track somewhere.
Yeah.
And so to be able to give readers, whatever it is that you're giving them, I'm very, very passionate about this subject. And it's just funny because now I'm, hearing my own words or taking my own medicine or whatever.
Good.
And it seemed like something that was part of what you're thinking when you're writing stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always thinking, what does my character need to hear? What is this true journey that she's on? And I always feel like if I'm on that journey, if my character's on that journey, maybe other people are too, So my next book I'm working on right now is about a man whose his girlfriend is a victim of emotional abuse by her mom. And I think that there's more of that than we realize out there. Yeah. And so it's what happens when you watch someone you love being victimized and you can't do anything about it. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have loved ones, whether it's a mom watching her daughter in a bad marriage, or, someone else watching a sibling in a bad marriage, or, whatever it is. It's like, how do you deal with the frustration of wanting justice and wanting, someone to stand up for themselves, and they don't, and you can't. So that's, it's a very small, it's not like it's political, there's no bombs, there's no, nothing big, but I think it's a relatable issue. What do we do with that sort of thing? So I like to take situations like that and say, okay, how can other people relate to that?
Yeah. So. This is so crazy, but I'm looking at the time going, darn it, we have to stop talking.
Oh, well, that's right. We'll just have to get together again. That's all there's to it.
Definitely. Okay. So if you had a last thought for writers, I don't know where people are who are listening right now, but.
Right. I think that as a writer, you have to be willing to go to the dark places and be really honest. Don't write a story with an agenda. Like, okay, I'm going to tell people this. Write the story by saying, okay, I'm going to go deep and I'm going to explore and ask questions and see what happens on the page. And it's okay if you don't come out with answers. Come out with a journey that your character's on. I think that it's the best books are where we are authentic with our pain, our fears, our grief, our joy, and these sorts of things. And I think that helps people connect. And then go ahead and say, well, where is the truth? Where is the truth? And what can I do with that? And how am I going to put that in? And so again, it's you as the author seeking that and asking the questions and being willing to put that in the story. So don't preach, don't write by an agenda, write by, dig into your characters, find out who they are, pull from yourself, and then just let the story happen on the page. And I think you'll be blessed by it and others and readers will.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, listen, you are also a writing teacher, and there are so many things I want to talk to you about that you and I have decided that I will interview you again in a few weeks. And we'll just let people know real quick right now that somewhere around the end of July, beginning of August, you're going to open up. Why don't we talk just briefly? We'll tell people what we're going to talk about in a couple of months.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to be talking about, so I run a class, or at a school called Novel Academy. So we'll be talking about that, but we have a couple of retreats every year, so we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about something called the story equation, which is sort of my method of getting story on the page, and so call it some things that maybe people will be able to use to help them on their stories. And so we'll just talk about all sorts of writing related fun stuff. And so how do you build a career? How do you do this writing thing and make it successful? So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about.
Excellent. Very good. And for everybody who was listening last week, Patricia Bradley was talking about how she went to one of Susan May Warren's camps and loved it so much. So one of the camps is going to be opening up registration about the time that we will air the episode. So everybody just think to yourself, maybe there's this camp that you want to go to in October, or there's a different one in February. It sounds very fun. I'm actually thinking to myself, how can I get there from Sweden?
I think that would be easy. You get on an airplane, you go to New York City, get on another airplane, go to Atlanta, get on another airplane, go to Destin. That's how you do it.
That does sound easy.
It's not so bad. You can read a book on the way. It'd be fun.
That's right. Well, until then, Susie May, where can people find you and your books?
Yeah, so you can go to susanmaywarren.com, and all the books are there with excerpts and things like that. If you're interested in writing and you're just getting started, go to learnhowtowriteanovel.com. There's tons of resources free on that site. Just go to the library, and there's just a couple thousand articles on writing and different things like that. So those are the two places where I hang out, and of course my Facebook page and Twitter and Instagram and all those kind of things. So anyway, that's where. And if you want to, you can also. I think I'm offering a free book right now on my website, so you can sign up and get a free download of a book and kind of launch the prequel that launches the Montana Rescue series. And so you can kind of get started for free in the series, see if you like it, and then eventually get to Stormfront, tie-in that story, and hopefully people will like it.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a great time for me. I'm sure other people are also thinking, she sounds totally cool and fun. I got to check it out.
Absolutely. Come on, let's hang out. It'd be awesome. So, no, but thanks so much for having me. It's really fun to chat with you. You're awesome, and this has been a great show. So thanks so much.